Maggie Carter came home that night with grease on her sleeves, flour on her hands, and a paper bag of food she had saved for her husband. That was the kind of wife she had always been. Even after 14 hours at the diner, even after cleaning the grill, counting the register, paying suppliers, and driving home with her feet aching so badly she could feel every step, Maggie still thought about Richard. She still wondered if he had eaten. She unlocked the front door quietly because Lily was already asleep upstairs. For a second, the house felt normal. Then she heard laughter coming from the living room. Richard was on a video call. 2 men from his company were on the screen. So was Vanessa Blake, the woman from marketing. The one with silk blouses, perfect makeup, and that careful little smile that made weak men feel like kings. Maggie stopped in the hallway. She did not mean to listen. At least, not at first. Then one of the men asked if Richard was bringing his wife to the promotion dinner. Richard gave a low laugh. Not loud. Not cruel enough for anyone else to call it cruelty. But Maggie knew that laugh. It was the sound he made when he was about to say something at her expense and pretend it was harmless. Then he said the sentence that ended 23 years of marriage before he even knew she had heard it. Maggie is a good woman, but she doesn't fit the life I'm about to step into. Nobody corrected him. Nobody said, "That's your wife." Nobody sounded embarrassed. Vanessa only gave a soft laugh and said, "A man about to become regional director needs a wife who looks like she belongs beside him." Maggie waited. 1 second, then another, then one more. She waited for Richard to say his wife had built a home with him, that she had raised their daughter, that she had paid bills when he was still climbing, that she had kept a diner alive with her bare hands while he chased the kind of future he was now so proud of. But Richard did not defend her. He sighed, almost like Maggie was the problem he had been too polite to name. "That's exactly the problem," he said. "My wife belongs to the life I came from, not the one I'm heading toward." Maggie did not cry. She did not storm into the living room. She did not throw the food at him or demand an explanation. She just stood there, holding his dinner, while something inside her went very still. Not peaceful, not numb, something colder than that. Then she turned toward the kitchen and saw the family iPad glowing on the counter. Richard had left his messages open. Vanessa's name was right there. And beneath it, one sentence sat on the screen like it had been waiting for Maggie. "Once you get promoted, you won't have to keep pretending she's enough." Maggie stared at those words for a long time. Long enough for the food in the bag to stop feeling warm. Then she took one slow breath, set Richard's dinner on the counter, and understood the truth. Her marriage had not died because another woman wanted her husband. It died because her husband had become ashamed of the woman who carried him there. And that kind of betrayal cuts differently. Before Richard started talking about executive dinners, regional titles, and rooms where Maggie no longer belonged, there had been a time when he talked about her like she was the strongest woman he knew. Maggie opened her diner 15 years earlier with more courage than money. It was not much at first. 6 tables, a tired old grill, a secondhand coffee machine, a front window that stuck when it rained, and a sign she painted herself on a Sunday afternoon while Richard held the ladder and laughed because the letters came out uneven. She called it Maggie's table. In the beginning, it barely survived. Some mornings, she made more coffee than profit. Some afternoons, she sat behind the counter, pretending not to worry, while soup cooled in the pot and the dining room stayed empty. But Maggie kept showing up. 5 in the morning, rain or shine, sick or exhausted, pregnant, then sore, then somehow still standing. Little by little, the diner became the kind of place people trusted. Truck drivers stopped there before sunrise. Nurses came in after overnight shifts. Retired couples sat in the same booth every Wednesday. Mothers brought their kids after school. Maggie remembered names, favorite orders, birthdays, allergies, and who needed a conversation and who only needed a quiet cup of coffee. She was not glamorous. She did not have time for glamorous. Her nails stayed short because she cooked. Her hair was usually tied back because steam and flour did not care about beauty. Her shoes were practical because 12 hours on tile floors will humble anybody. Her hands were rough because she worked with them. But Maggie knew how to keep a life running. She knew payroll. She knew rent. She knew taxes, inventory, supplier bills, broken freezers, insurance payments, and the sick little feeling of hoping a slow month did not turn into a bad one. She also knew how to keep a family from falling apart. When Richard was still trying to move up, Maggie's diner carried them more times than he liked to admit. When he took night classes for a management certificate, Maggie paid the utility bill late and told him not to worry. When he needed a better suit for an interview, she bought it from the diner account and put off replacing the freezer for another month. When he started networking with people who mattered, she packed his lunches, washed his shirts, stayed up with Lily, and let him sleep before early meetings. Back then, Richard noticed. Or at least he acted like he did. He used to come into the diner with a smile and kiss Maggie on the cheek in front of everyone. He brought coworkers in for lunch and told them his wife made the best meatloaf in the county. He told people she was the reason he could chase bigger things, because she had a spine made of steel and a heart that never quit. Maggie believed him. That was the cruel part. She believed that while Richard was building his career, they were building a life together. Their daughter Lily grew up in that diner almost as much as she grew up in their house. She did homework in the back booth. She folded napkins when she was little. She learned early that her mother was the one who remembered everything. Doctor appointments, school projects, parent meetings, birthday cupcakes, permission slips, dinner on the table, clean uniforms, gas in the car, money in the lunch account. Richard loved Lily. At least, he said he did. But love that only shows up when it is easy starts to look less like love and more like a mood. As the years passed, Richard became busier. Then important. Then too important. His words changed first. He stopped saying Maggie was hard-working and started saying she worked too much. He stopped calling the diner charming and started calling it small. He stopped admiring her strength and started acting like her tiredness embarrassed him. The woman who had helped him rise became the woman he no longer wanted standing beside him. And the cruelest part was this. The more Richard rose in public, the smaller he tried to make Maggie feel at home. It did not happen in one day. Men like Richard rarely become cruel all at once. They test the room first. They make a little joke and watch your face. Then they make another one. Then they start saying it in front of other people. And one day, what used to be a joke becomes the normal way they speak to you. Richard's new circle was polished, loud, and hungry for status. His company was full of men who talked like every dinner was a ladder and every friendship was a deal. They compared watches, cars, vacation homes, golf clubs, and wives, as if marriage was just another piece of the promotion package. Some of them had wives who worked in finance, law, consulting, or real estate. Women with smooth hair, careful makeup, expensive dresses, and the kind of confidence that comes from never ending a shift, smelling like fried onions. Richard started noticing, then he started comparing. At first, it sounded harmless. He would come home from a company dinner and say one man's wife had really carried herself well. Or he would mention how another woman knew exactly how to speak to clients. Then he would look at Maggie, still in her diner shirt, wiping down the kitchen counter at 10 at night, and say nothing. That silence was worse than the comment. After a while, he stopped hiding it. "You could try a little harder," he told her one morning while she was packing Lily's lunch. Maggie looked down at herself. Black pants, work shoes, a clean shirt with the diner logo on it. "I'm opening in 30 minutes, she said. Richard sighed like she had missed the point on purpose. "I mean in general, Maggie." That became his favorite kind of cruelty. Vague enough to deny. Sharp enough to leave a mark. He complained about her hair being tied back. He complained about her dry hands. He said her clothes were too plain. He said she smelled like the diner, even after she showered. He told her she did not understand the kind of rooms he was stepping into now. One night, after a corporate event, he stood in their bedroom doorway and said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm dragging my old life into rooms where it doesn't belong." Maggie was folding Lily's laundry when he said it. She did not answer right away. Because what do you say to a man who calls the life you built together old? Richard got worse as the promotion got closer. He drank more. He came home later. He missed Lily's school concert because he said a client dinner ran long, then could not even remember which song she had performed. He promised to pick her up from debate practice and left her waiting 45 minutes until Maggie closed the diner early and drove across town herself. When Maggie asked him to be more present, he acted wounded. "You always make me the villain," he said. When she asked about the late nights, he called her suspicious. When she asked about Vanessa Blake, he almost laughed. "Vanessa understands my world," he said. "That doesn't mean anything is happening." Vanessa worked in marketing and corporate events. She knew how to flatter a man like Richard without making it too obvious. She wore silk blouses, moved through hallways like they were hotel lobbies, and had a soft voice that made every compliment sound private. She called Richard executive material. That phrase did something to him. It fed the weakest part of him, the part that wanted to believe he had outgrown the woman who stood beside him when there was nothing polished about his life at all. So when Maggie questioned the sudden lunches, the late calls, and the messages that made him turn his phone face down, Richard did what guilty men often do. He punished her for noticing. He said she was insecure because she did not dress like Vanessa. He said she was controlling because she asked where he had been. He said she was bitter because he was moving forward. He said she was using Lily to make him feel guilty, By then, Maggie could feel the marriage changing. She could feel something rotten under the floorboards. But feeling something and proving it are not the same. And Maggie still did not know how far Richard had already gone. Not until the night she heard his real voice. That night did not create the wound. It only opened it wide enough for Maggie to finally see what had been growing underneath. When Richard said she belonged to the life he came from, Maggie understood something she had been trying not to understand for a long time. He had not just been pulling away from her. He had been rewriting her. In Richard's new version of the story, Maggie was not the woman who helped him survive all those long years of climbing. She was not the wife who fed him, raised their daughter, protected the house, and kept money moving when his ambition cost more than his paycheck could handle. No. Now she was the diner wife, the tired wife, the woman with flour on her shirt and grease on her sleeves. The woman he could mention with politeness, maybe even gratitude, but not pride. That realization did not make Maggie scream. It made her still. She stood in the hallway after the video call and felt something inside her go quiet in a way that scared her. She had spent years reacting to Richard's moods. Years asking what she had done wrong. Years looking in the mirror and wondering when she had become so easy for him to dismiss. But when she saw that family iPad glowing on the kitchen counter, the pain changed shape. It became information. Richard had left his account open on the same device they had used for calendars, school emails, family photos, recipes, and grocery lists. Maggie had not broken into anything. She had not guessed a password. She had not installed anything. The messages were sitting there in the middle of the kitchen, bright as a confession. Vanessa's name was at the top. Maggie read only what was already open. 3 more weeks and the promotion is yours. Then another message. After that, you can stop pretending your marriage still represents you. Then another. I booked the same hotel as last time. Put it under client dinner if you need to. That was the sentence that made Maggie set the food bag down. Not because she was surprised anymore. The surprise had already passed. It was because the lie finally had edges. Hotel. Client dinner. Same as last time. This was not innocent attention from a woman at work. It was not a friendship Richard could explain away with a sigh and a tired face. It was not 2 ambitious people talking about business. This was a man building a second life and using corporate language to make it sound clean. Maggie took photos of the messages that were visible on the screen. Her hands shook, but she moved carefully. She did not scroll through every folder. She did not go hunting through private things she had no right to touch. She did not try to become the kind of person Richard could later accuse her of being. She saved what he had left open in their shared home. Then she put the iPad back exactly where it had been. Richard was still laughing in the living room. That sound stayed with her, because it told her something plain. He was not afraid of hurting her. He was only afraid of being caught. Maggie walked upstairs, changed out of her diner clothes, washed the flour from her hands, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. For a moment she saw what Richard had trained her to see. A tired woman. A plain woman. A woman who had spent too many years making sure everyone else had what they needed. Then she looked again, and this time she saw the owner of a business, a mother. A woman who understood receipts, records, dates, schedules, payments, and patterns. Richard thought she was too messy to notice details. He had forgotten that details were how Maggie had survived. That night, she made no speech. She packed no suitcase. She did not wake Lily. She did not confront Richard when he finally came to bed smelling like whiskey and expensive cologne. She lay beside him in the dark and listened to the steady arrogance of his breathing. And for the first time in years, Maggie did not wonder how to save the marriage. She wondered how to leave it cleanly. Because she did not want to win another argument with a man who had already decided she was beneath him. She wanted proof. She wanted protection. She wanted her daughter safe. And more than anything, she wanted a life where she never had to beg a man to respect the woman who had carried him. The next morning, Maggie did something Richard would have laughed at if he had known. She called a divorce attorney before she opened the diner. Her name was Patricia Grant. She was 58, with a calm voice, gray hair pulled neatly behind her ears, and the kind of steady eyes that made people tell the truth, even when they had planned to lie. Maggie sat across from her at a small conference table, still in her work clothes. She held a folder that was thinner than her fear, but somehow heavier than her marriage had felt in years. She told Patricia everything. The video call, the messages on the family iPad, Vanessa, the hotel line, the way Richard had started talking about her, like she was some old piece of furniture he was embarrassed to bring into a better room. Patricia did not look shocked. That bothered Maggie for a second. Then she understood why. Women had probably sat in that same chair before. Different names, different husbands, different houses. Same tired eyes. Same quiet question. Was I imagining it? Patricia listened until Maggie finished. Then she folded her hands on the table. I know you're hurt, she said, but hurt will not protect you in court. Documentation will. That was the first lesson Maggie learned. Pain explained why she needed to leave. Evidence would decide how safely she could do it. Patricia told her not to turn this into revenge. No public posts. No screaming in a parking lot. No calling Richard's boss in a rage. No confronting Vanessa. No dramatic traps. No illegal recordings. No digging through private accounts she had no right to access. In some states, Patricia said, recordings and video calls can get complicated very fast. Do not build your whole case on something the court may not want to touch. We need cleaner records. So Maggie went back to the diner and did what she had done for 15 years. She organized. Richard had forgotten something important. The woman he called messy had been balancing payroll, supplier invoices, rent, repairs, insurance, tax estimates, family bills, and school expenses, while half asleep and running on coffee. Details were not her weakness. Details were her life. She started with a joint account. She printed statements going back months, then a year, then longer. She marked restaurant charges on nights Richard claimed he was stuck at work. She marked hotel deposits, flower shops, jewelry stores, ride services in parts of the city where he had no client meetings listed. Then came the credit cards. At first, the charges looked ordinary. Dinner, parking, drinks, client entertainment. But when Maggie compared the dates against Richard's work calendar, the clean little labels began to rot. A steakhouse dinner listed as a client meeting happened on a night he told her he was at the office. A boutique hotel charge matched the same evening Vanessa had texted. Same room as last time. Maggie did not cry when she found that one. She only wrote the date down. That was how she survived those weeks. She turned heartbreak into dates, lies into receipts, suspicion into folders. Patricia also told her to document parenting, not feelings, facts. So Maggie pulled school emails, Lily's medical appointment reminders, messages from teachers, debate practice schedules, sign-up sheets, records showing who picked Lily up, who answered the school nurse, who paid for field trips, who sat through parent meetings, who remembered the allergy form, who showed up when it mattered. Richard loved calling himself a family man when other people were listening. The calendar told a different story. There were nights he promised to pick Lily up and forgot. Nights Maggie closed the diner early because Richard was still with clients. Weekends he missed because he had golf with executives. School events he skipped. Then later asked what class Lily had even been performing for. Maggie hated writing that down. Not because it was hard to prove, because it was hard to admit. For years, she had protected Richard from the full truth of his absence. She had covered for him with Lily. She had told herself he was tired, busy, under pressure, trying to build something for the family. Now she saw the ugly shape of it. Richard was not building for them anymore. He was building a way out. The first time he hinted at custody, Maggie almost laughed from the shock. They were standing in the kitchen after Lily had gone upstairs. Richard leaned against the counter, still wearing his work shirt, still smelling faintly of whiskey. "If things ever got ugly," he said, "I'd want 50-50 custody." Maggie looked at him. "You barely know her schedule." His face tightened. "That's not fair." "No," Maggie said quietly. "What isn't fair is Lily waiting outside school because you forgot her again." Richard's eyes went cold. Then he said the kind of thing Patricia had warned her about. The kind of thing men say when money matters more to them than decency. "Well, if you come after me for child support, maybe we should check everything properly. Maybe I should ask for a DNA test." The room went silent. Maggie felt the words land before she fully understood them. Lily was 16. Richard had signed her birth certificate. He had held her in the hospital. He had taught her to ride a bike, badly, and taken pictures at kindergarten graduation. He had called her his little girl whenever it made him look tender. And now, because Vanessa and his friends had convinced him that fatherhood could be used like leverage, he was willing to throw doubt over his own child. Not because he believed it, because he wanted Maggie afraid. Maggie said nothing that night. She walked upstairs, shut herself in the bathroom, and gripped the sink until the shaking passed. The next morning, Patricia's voice stayed calm. "According to the law in our state," she said, "the fact that he signed the birth certificate and has acted as her father for 16 years matters. If he has no real reason to question paternity, and he raises this only after child support comes up, that may tell the court more about him than about you." Maggie sat there with the phone pressed to her ear. For the first time, Richard's threat did not feel like power. It felt like proof. Proof that he would hurt even Lily's sense of safety if it saved him money or pride. So Maggie kept going. She gathered the diner records too. Tax returns, profit and loss statements, payroll reports, lease payments, supplier invoices, bank deposits. Not because she wanted to pretend she was rich. She was not. But she wanted the court to see the truth. She was stable. She was working. She was the consistent parent. She was not the helpless, bitter woman Richard had started describing to anyone willing to listen. By the time Richard finally noticed Maggie was no longer arguing with him, she already had a file thick enough to change the rest of his life. For several weeks, Maggie lived two lives. In the morning, she unlocked the diner before sunrise. She brewed coffee, checked the ovens, greeted regulars by name, and smiled when customers asked if everything was all right. Everything was not all right. But Maggie had learned something long ago. Survival often looks ordinary from the outside. She served eggs. She sliced pie. She refilled coffee. She laughed softly with older customers who had no idea her marriage was coming apart behind her eyes. At night, she went home and kept the house quiet for Lily. She made dinner, asked about homework, washed uniforms, signed forms, sat at the kitchen table while Lily studied, pretending not to notice when her daughter kept glancing at her with worry. Richard mistook Maggie's silence for surrender. That was his biggest mistake. He thought she had accepted her place, the tired wife, the dino wife. The woman who would complain a little, cry a little, then keep feeding him because that was what she had always done. He did not understand that quiet can mean grief. And sometimes, quiet means preparation. The deeper Maggie looked, the worse the records became. At first, Patricia focused on family money, but some of Richard's charges did not come from their joint accounts or personal cards. They appeared in forwarded receipts, reimbursement notices, and email reminders Richard had carelessly allowed to sync through the family computer. Client dinner, corporate lodging, transportation, executive hospitality. Those words sounded clean until Maggie matched them with Vanessa's messages. A resort charge on a weekend Richard claimed to be attending a leadership retreat. A car service receipt at midnight after a client event that had no client attached. 2 airline upgrades for a trip where the company's schedule showed Richard traveling alone. Then there was the hotel. The same hotel from Vanessa's message. Paid through a company card. Labeled as client entertainment. Maggie stared at that one for a long time. Not because it surprised her anymore. Because it revealed something even uglier. Richard had not just risked his marriage for Vanessa. He had risked his career. And he had done it with the same arrogance he brought home every night. The belief that rules were for smaller people. The belief that if he wore the right suit and spoke with enough confidence, no one would look too closely. Maggie did not call his company. She wanted to. There were moments when she stood in the diner office with her phone in her hand and imagined telling someone exactly what their almost regional director had been doing with company money. But Patricia had been clear. Do not act out of anger, she said. Let the evidence serve your case first. So Maggie gave every receipt, every email, every date, every inconsistency to Patricia. Patricia called some of it potential marital waste. Some of it raised questions about financial honesty. Some of it might matter later, depending on what Richard claimed under oath. That was enough. Maggie did not need to destroy him. She only needed to stop protecting him from himself. The confrontation came on a Thursday night. Richard came home late, like he usually did by then. His tie was loose. His eyes were glossy. His confidence was still hanging on him like an expensive coat he had not quite paid for. He smelled like whiskey, cologne, and a perfume Maggie had never owned. She was sitting at the kitchen table. A folder sat in front of her. For one brief second, Richard looked annoyed. Not afraid. Not guilty. Just annoyed. Like Maggie had interrupted the life he thought he was already living somewhere else. "What is this supposed to be?" he asked. Maggie looked at him for a long moment. The man standing in front of her was not the young husband who once held the ladder while she painted the diner sign. He was not the man who cried when Lily was born. He was not even the man who used to sit at the counter after closing and tell Maggie he was proud of her. That man had been buried under ambition, vanity, and the weak hunger to be admired by people who did not love him. Maggie slid the folder across the table. "The part of your promotion story you forgot to delete." Richard opened it. At first, his face showed confusion, then irritation. Then something small and pale moved across his expression. Fear. He saw the hotel receipt, the messages from Vanessa, the client entertainment charge, the parenting calendar, the missed pickups, the school emails, the notes from Patricia, and right on top, clean and plain, the first page of the divorce filing. He closed the folder too quickly. "You went through my things." Maggie did not raise her voice. "No," she said. "You left your lies in our house." His jaw tightened. "You're trying to ruin me." That almost made her smile, but there was no joy in it. "No, Richard, I'm not ruining your future. I'm refusing to keep funding it." That was when the mask cracked. He called her bitter. He called her jealous. He called her vindictive. He said Vanessa understood the world he was trying to build. He said Maggie had always wanted to hold him back. He said she did not know what kind of pressure he was under, or what kind of men he had to compete with. Maggie let him talk. There is a strange kind of freedom in listening to someone confirm your decision, sentence by sentence. Every word he said made leaving easier. When he finally ran out of things to blame her for, Maggie placed the divorce papers on top of the folder. "I'm done," she said. Richard looked at the papers, then at her, and for the first time in years, he did not seem sure of the room he was standing in. The woman he thought was too tired to notice had noticed everything. The woman he thought was too plain to leave had already found the door. The woman he thought would cry and beg had brought paperwork. Richard thought the worst part was the divorce papers. He was wrong. The worst part came later, when his lies had to sit under courtroom lights. By the time they stood in court, Richard had already started performing. He wore his best suit. He spoke softly. He kept his face serious, controlled, almost wounded. He tried to look like a responsible executive who had been dragged into an ugly divorce by a wife who simply did not understand the pressure of his career. He described Maggie as emotional. He described the diner as modest, almost like it was a hobby that had gotten too large. He said he loved Lily and wanted equal custody. He said he only wanted fairness. Patricia Grant let him speak. That was her style. She did not interrupt the man while he was building his own trap. Then she opened the file. The courtroom did not need shouting. It needed patterns. Patricia showed the judge the school emails where Maggie was the only parent responding. Appointment records where Maggie signed every form. Debate schedules where Richard had promised to show up and did not. Text from Lily asking if someone was coming to pick her up. Messages from Maggie saying she had closed the diner early because Richard had forgotten again. No one had to call Richard a part-time father. The calendar did it for them. Then came the child support issue. Patricia presented the message where Richard told a friend he would push for 50-50 custody because he was not paying diner money to subsidize Maggie's life. Maggie remembered the first time she read that line. Diner money. As if the same diner had not helped feed him, dress him, house him, and give him the freedom to chase every title he now used to look down on her. The judge did not look amused. Then Patricia addressed the DNA threat. Carefully, calmly, without turning it into a show. She explained that Richard had signed Lily's birth certificate. He had raised her for 16 years. He had acted as her father every day. It made him look like a good man. And he had offered no real reason to question paternity until child support entered the conversation. Richard shifted in his chair. He looked smaller then. Not because Maggie had attacked him. Because his own words had walked into the room ahead of him. The financial records came next. Restaurant charges, hotel receipts, flowers, gifts, airline upgrades, personal expenses tied to Vanessa, some from family money, some disguised as work-related entertainment. Patricia did not accuse beyond what she could prove. She did not need to. The pattern was ugly enough. Maggie watched Richard's confidence drain slowly. Not all at once. Men like Richard do not collapse in one clean moment. They lose pieces of themselves as each lie stops working. The court did not give him the clean story he wanted. Maggie remained Lily's primary residential parent. Richard received parenting time, but not the 50-50 schedule he had tried to use as a financial shield. Child support was calculated based on his real income, including the bonus structure and promotion path he had bragged about in messages, when he thought it made him look powerful. Some of the money he had spent on Vanessa was considered in the division of marital finances. Not every dollar became a punishment. Court is not a movie. But enough of it mattered. Enough for Richard to feel the cost of what he had tried to hide. He walked out stiff and angry. Vanessa was waiting for him in the parking lot. For a while, Richard still acted like he had won something. He told people he was finally free. He moved into an apartment that looked good online and felt empty in person. He took Vanessa to dinners he could no longer comfortably afford. He posted careful pictures where he looked like a man starting over, not a man bleeding money from a life he had broken himself. That lasted 3 months. Then the company investigation began. A finance manager flagged several expenses under client entertainment. The dates did not match client meetings. The hotel records did not match business travel. The restaurant charges lined up with weekends, personal messages, and Vanessa's name appearing in places it should never have been. The promotion disappeared first. Then the office door closed. Then Richard lost the job completely. Vanessa did not stay long after that. She had admired the title, not the man. The company card, not the character. The executive future, not the father behind on apologies and child support. When the money got tight and the shame got loud, Vanessa left him with the same loyalty she had shown Maggie. None. Richard's messages started slowly. First, he said he was sorry. Then he said he had been confused. Then he said the company had been toxic. His friends had filled his head. Vanessa had manipulated him. The promotion pressure had changed him. He sounded like a man trying to hand pieces of his guilt to anyone willing to carry them. Finally, he came to the diner. Maggie saw him through the front window before he opened the door. His suit was gone. His face looked older. His pride looked bruised. Lily was there that afternoon, helping her mother box catering orders. Richard looked at them both like a man trying to walk back into a house after watching it burn down from his own match. "I lost myself," he said. Maggie wiped her hands on a towel and looked at him. "No, Richard. You didn't lose us because of Vanessa. You lost us because you were ashamed of the people who loved you before anyone applauded you." Lily did not run to him. She did not cry into his arms. She only stood beside her mother, and that hurt him more than any judge ever could. Richard left the diner alone. The bell above the door rang behind him, small and final. For years, he had believed the world would become bigger once he escaped Maggie's small life. In the end, the life he mocked kept growing. And the life he chased could not survive without someone else paying for it. After the divorce, Maggie learned something quiet about peace. It does not always arrive like a celebration. Sometimes it arrives as silence in your own kitchen. No footsteps at midnight. No whiskey on someone's breath. No cruel little comment about your hair, your hands, your clothes, or the smell of food on your shirt. Just silence. Safe silence. And Maggie used that silence to build. Maggie's table did not turn into a success story overnight. Real things rarely move that fast. But without Richard draining the house, without his moods filling every corner, without his shame hanging over her like smoke, Maggie had room to think again. She added catering on weekends, then small office lunches, then holiday trays. Then she hired another cook and 2 part-time servers. She replaced the old sign out front with one that looked warm and clean, the kind of sign that made people slow down when they passed it. The diner became busier, not flashy, not famous, just steady. And steady, Maggie had learned, was not something to be ashamed of. Lily noticed the change in her mother before anyone else did. Maggie did not become a different woman. She became lighter. She laughed more. She slept better. She stopped apologizing for being tired. She stopped explaining why her hands looked rough. She stopped shrinking before anyone even asked her to. A few months later, Lily received a letter that made Maggie cry harder than the divorce papers ever did. It was a scholarship offer from a university overseas. Lily stood in the diner office with trembling hands, reading the letter twice because she could not believe it was real. Maggie pulled her daughter into her arms and held her like she was still the little girl who used to do homework in the back booth while her mother counted the register. But this time, Maggie was not holding her because she was afraid. She was holding her because the life they had fought for was finally opening. Daniel was there that evening. He had come in for his usual coffee, but stayed to fix a loose shelf near the counter and help Maggie carry boxes to the storage room. Daniel had been a regular for a long time. Quiet. Patient. The kind of man who asked if Maggie had eaten and then actually listened to the answer. He had heard enough of her story to understand the pain, but he never treated her like a wound. When Lily told him about the scholarship, Daniel smiled, like the good news belonged to the whole room. He did not try to act like a father. He did not take credit. He only said, "Your mother must be very proud." That was one of the reasons Maggie trusted him. He knew how to stand close, without taking over. Later, Daniel told Maggie he cared about her. He said he wanted the chance to stand beside her, not in front of her, not over her, just beside her. Maggie was honest. She told him she was still afraid. She was tired of weak men who let pride, attention, and outside voices make their choices for them. She could not promise him love. Not yet. Maybe not soon. Daniel did not push. He only nodded and said, "Then let me be your friend until friendship feels safe." So Maggie let him. And maybe that was the beginning of something. Not a rescue. Not a fantasy. Something slower. Something earned. One evening, the diner was warm and full. Maggie stood behind the counter. Lily sat on a stool with her scholarship letter beside her plate. Daniel sat across from them, laughing softly at something Lily had said about learning how to cook for herself overseas. From outside, Richard walked past the front window. He stopped. For a long moment, he did not move. There they were. His ex-wife, his daughter, and a man who had not forced his way into Richard's place, but had earned his seat through patience. Maggie looked peaceful. Lily looked safe. Daniel looked at both of them with quiet respect. It was not a rich scene, not polished, not the kind of image Richard had chased with Vanessa. Company dinners, hotel bars, and borrowed status. It was better than that. It was real. And Richard finally understood that the small diner he had once been ashamed of had become the home he no longer belonged in. Later, Maggie heard Richard was working construction jobs, carrying heavy materials under the sun to keep up with debt and child support. She did not celebrate it. She had no need to. Her victory was not Richard's suffering. Her victory was standing in her own diner, watching her daughter prepare for a future, and letting a good man remain beside her without fear. Sometimes, freedom does not arrive as revenge. Sometimes it looks like your child's scholarship letter on the counter, a friend who waits patiently, a business that keeps growing, and a window your past can only look through from the outside. If this story reminded you that being underestimated is not the same as being weak, leave your thoughts below. And if you want more stories about betrayal, divorce, custody battles, evidence, and quiet justice, subscribe and stay with us for the next one.